The Museum of Living Things stretched across space like a giant glass bubble. Thousands of containers filled with creatures from 100 different worlds glimmered under artificial light. Some containers held plants that could eat metal. Others held creatures that looked like living crystals. But today, something new was coming. Curator Lion sat at his control station, his 4 eyes blinking in different directions. Each eye watched a different screen. His blue-green skin seemed to shimmer with excitement. Another specimen was about to arrive from a small, mostly unknown planet called Earth. The transport pod arrived with a soft hiss. Mechanical arms moved carefully, carrying a transparent container. Inside, a human sat quietly. He looked small. He looked weak. To the alien researchers, he seemed absolutely ordinary. J. Park was anything but ordinary. He had been sleeping when they took him. One moment, he was in his small apartment in Seoul. The next moment, darkness. When he woke up, everything was strange. Bright lights, strange sounds, metallic walls that seemed to breathe and move. But Jay didn't show fear. He watched, he listened, and he planned. Specimen EA-427, a computer voice announced. Human. Male. Age, 32. Height, 178 centimeters. Weight, 76 kilograms. The container moved smoothly into a larger glass room. Sensors scanned every inch of Jay's body. Machines took blood samples. Tiny robots moved around him, measuring everything they could find. They thought he was just another animal, another thing to be studied and kept. They were wrong. Jay's eyes were calm, too calm. While the machines worked, he studied everything around him. The walls, the ceiling, the doors, the small robot that kept moving closer to take measurements. He noticed how it moved, how it worked, how its sensors functioned. In the big museum of living things, creatures from 100 worlds were kept in perfect little boxes. Creatures that flew, creatures that could live in fire, creatures that changed shape. But none of them were like Jai. The Valerian researchers didn't understand humans. They saw a simple animal. They saw something weak. They saw something that could be controlled. Jay saw an opportunity. The room was a perfect circle. White walls, smooth floor, a single door that looked strong, but Jay knew nothing was truly unbreakable. Cameras watched from every corner. But cameras could be fooled. Systems could be broken. Subject seems calm, one researcher said to another. Typical primitive response. No signs of advanced cognitive resistance. If they could hear Jay's thoughts, they would have been afraid. Every minute, every second, Jay was learning. The way the lights worked, the sound of the machines, the pattern of the guards. He wasn't just sitting. He was planning. Outside the container, alien researchers moved around. They took notes. They discussed him like he was nothing more than a strange bug. They didn't know that the bug was about to become a hurricane. The Galactic Zoo had made a mistake, a big mistake. They had captured something they could never truly understand. And Jay Park was about to show them exactly how big that mistake was. The classification room was cold and bright. Machines lined the walls. Screens filled with strange symbols flickered everywhere. Jay sat in the middle of the room, looking calm. But inside, his mind was racing. Dr. Rena, the lead researcher, moved her 6-fingered hand over a control panel. Her skin was a pale purple, almost silver in the harsh light. She looked at Ja like he was a puzzle she needed to solve. Class D sentient primitive, she said to her assistant. The words came out of a translation device that made her voice sound flat and mechanical. Minimal cognitive complexity. Limited technological understanding. Jay understood every word, but he didn't show it. The first test was simple. A series of shapes appeared on a screen. Blue triangles, red circles, green squares. The machine wanted him to match them. Jay knew exactly what they were doing. They were testing his pattern recognition, his problem-solving skills. He made deliberate mistakes. Not too many, just enough to look like he was struggling, just enough to make them think he was simple. His eyes never showed how smart he really was. He kept them a little empty, a little confused. The next test was harder. A complex machine dropped different objects in front of him. Metal pieces, electronic parts, strange tools from alien worlds. The test was to see how he would use them, how he would solve a problem. Ja looked at the objects carefully. To the researchers, he seemed to be thinking hard. In reality, he was mapping every detail of the machine that was testing him. The way it moved, the sensors it used, the small gaps between its mechanical parts. Fascinating, Dr. Rena mumbled. Primitive problem-solving skills, but skills nonetheless. Another researcher, named Kivo, disagreed. Minimal cognitive function, he said. Watch how slowly he moves, how carefully he thinks. They didn't know that every slow movement was a calculation. Every careful thought was a plan. Blood tests came next. Machines pulled tiny samples. Bright lights scanned his body. They looked at his DNA. They checked his brain waves. They thought they were learning about him. But Jay was learning about them. The translation device made strange sounds. It tried to understand his language, his responses. But languages were more than just words. Languages were about understanding, about seeing between the lines. Jay gave them exactly what they wanted to see. A simple creature, a being that could be studied, controlled, kept in a box. One test showed him pictures, alien worlds, strange landscapes, complicated machines. He was supposed to identify them, to show what he knew. Jay made sure to look confused, to seem lost. But his mind was a computer. Every image went into perfect memory. Every detail was stored, saved, ready to be used. Hours passed. More tests, more scanning, more measuring. The researchers thought they were learning about humans, but humans had been watching other species for thousands of years. Humans knew how to hide, how to blend, how to survive. Dr. Rena made a final note. Specimen shows basic intelligence. Classification, Class D primitive, controllable. She was so wrong. Ja looked at the wall. To everyone else, his look was empty. But behind those eyes, a storm was building. A plan was taking shape, and the Galactic Zoo had no idea what was coming. Weeks passed in the Galactic Zoo. Jay's container became his world. But he was never truly trapped. Every day, he learned something new. The space station was huge, bigger than any building on Earth. It moved slowly through space, a giant glass bubble filled with living things from 100 different worlds. Jad watched everything. He watched how the robots moved, how the doors opened, how the security systems worked. At first, the guards were careful. They watched him all the time. Cameras followed his every move. But humans are patient. Humans can wait. And Jay was very good at waiting. He started with small things. The communication system was his first target. During feeding times, he watched how the translation devices worked, how words changed from one language to another, how information moved through the station's networks. The feeding robot was simple. It had 3 arms. One arm held food. One arm scanned his health. The third arm cleaned his living space. Jai studied each movement. Each small action told him something important. On the 23rd day, he understood something critical. The station's computer system was connected. Everything talked to everything else. The feeding robot talked to the medical systems. The medical systems talked to the security systems. One big network of information. And networks can be broken. The alien researchers thought they knew everything about him. They wrote reports. They took notes. Subject shows minimal adaptive capabilities. They would say, typical primitive response patterns. Jay smiled inside. Let them think that. He learned the station's rhythm. When the guards changed. When the systems ran their daily checks. When the lights dimmed and brightened. Everything had a pattern. and patterns can be understood, can be used. The other specimens in the Galactic Zoo were different. Some were bigger than buildings. Some were smaller than a human hand. Some could change shape. Some could live in fire or ice. But none of them were watching. None of them were planning. Jay made friends with a small robot that cleaned his container. It wasn't really a friend, but he made the robot think they were connected. He studied how it moved, how it processed information, how its simple brain worked. Communication was his weapon. Not just words, not just sounds, but understanding, watching, learning. The station had weak points. Every system has weak points. Jay found them one by one. A small connection here, a tiny network link there. Each discovery was another piece of a big puzzle. The researchers continued their tests. They thought they were learning about him, but he was learning about them, their technology, their weaknesses, their mistakes. Subject showing signs of routine adaptation, one report read. Typical containment response for lower-level intelligent species. They had no idea. Ja looked like he was just sitting, just waiting. But his mind was building a plan that would change everything. A plan that would show the Galactic Zoo what a human could really do. Adaptation is not just about survival. Adaptation is about winning. And Jay Park was going to win. The translation device was old, not broken, but old. Jay knew old things always have secrets. He waited for the right moment. Weeks of watching had taught him patience. The junior researchers were always the weakest link. Young, curious, always wanting to prove something. One researcher stood out. Her name was Lyra. She was different from the others. Younger, more interested. Her eyes showed something the others didn't have. A spark of real curiosity. Jay made his first move during a routine health check. The translation device crackled. Most of the time, it only half worked. But today, Jay would make it work perfectly. Interesting world, he said slowly. The words came out careful, measured. Lyra looked up. Most researchers would have ignored him, but not her. She stopped, looked closer. "You can speak?" she asked. Her voice came through the device with a strange echo. Joe looked confused, but it was a careful kind of confusion. "Speak, yes, but hard. Your words strange." It was a lie. He understood everything perfectly, but they couldn't know that. Lyra moved closer, her clipboard forgotten, her scientific training forgotten. Pure curiosity took over. "Tell me about your world," she said. And Jay began to spin a story, not the real story, a story they would believe, a story that would give him exactly what he needed. He told her about a small village, about simple people, about a world that seemed backward, but each word was a carefully placed piece of information. Each sentence was a weapon. "Our technology simple," he said. "We learn slow. We watch. We wait." Lyra made notes. Her hands moved quickly across her digital pad. She thought she was learning about humans. She had no idea what Jay was really doing. With each conversation, Jay learned more. He learned about the station's systems, about the other researchers, about the security protocols. Information flowed both ways, but he was collecting far more than he was giving. The security cameras watched. But cameras can be fooled, especially by someone who understands how they work. Other researchers started to notice. Dr. Rinna didn't like what was happening. "The specimen is becoming too communicative," she told Kivo. "This is not normal." But they were too late. Jay asked questions, simple questions, but important questions. How long station fly? What other creatures here? How big is space? Each question was a tool. Each answer was a piece of a bigger plan. Lyra thought she was making a breakthrough. Scientists always want to be the first to discover something new, to prove something nobody else has proven. She had no idea she was being used. The translation device continued to crackle. Sometimes words came out clear. Sometimes they were broken. But Jay made sure every important word was understood. Humans learn, he would say. Humans always learn. How right he was. In the big glass museum of living things, something was changing. The specimen was no longer just a specimen. The human was becoming something else. Something dangerous. Something was wrong. Nobody noticed at first, but something was definitely wrong. The first signs were small. A computer screen that flickered for half a second. A robot that moved just a little bit slower. A communication system that paused for a moment too long. Jay watched and waited. The station's chief of security was named Kira Ren. She was good at her job. Very good. Her species had evolved to notice small changes, small problems, and something felt off. Run a full system check, she told her team. Her 4 eyes moved quickly between different screens. Each eye saw something different, but they all saw something was wrong. Jay had been careful, very careful. The tiny machines he had created were invisible, smaller than a human hair, smaller than the smallest robot. They moved through the station's computer systems like ghosts. Tiny, silent, watching. In the medical bay, a robot moved differently, just a tiny bit different. In the communication center, a signal dropped for a millisecond. In the security systems, a camera changed its focus by a fraction of a degree. Nobody would notice, except someone who was looking very carefully. Kira was looking carefully. Something is wrong, she told her assistant. Run another diagnostic. The assistant looked confused. Everything checks out, he said. All systems normal. But systems are never completely normal. Ja had learned something important about alien technology. Everything was connected. Everything talked to everything else. And if everything talks, everything can be listened to. Everything can be changed. His first goal was simple. Understand the system. Break the system. But not all at once. Slowly. Carefully. The feeding robots started to move differently. Just a little bit. The cleaning robots changed their routes. Just a tiny bit. The communication systems had small pauses, just for a moment. Kira began to worry. I want a complete systems review, she told her team. Check everything. And I mean everything. But it was too late. Jay's tiny machines were everywhere, in every computer, in every robot, in every system. They watched, they learned, they changed things, small things, but important things. A door that should open quickly now opened slowly. A communication signal that should be clear now had small breaks. A robot that should move straight now moved with a tiny wobble. The Galactic Zoo had no idea what was coming. Judd looked like he was just sitting, just waiting. But his mind was working. His plan was moving forward, piece by piece, step by step. The first strike was not about destruction. The first strike was about understanding, about breaking something slowly, about showing how weak they really were. Humans are patient. Humans can wait. And Jay was going to make them wait. Something was wrong in the Galactic Zoo, and nobody knew how wrong things were about to become. Everything happened fast, but it also happened slow. Jay had been planning this moment for weeks. Every small change, every tiny adjustment. They were all building to this. The first alarms were quiet, just a small sound, a tiny beep that most people would miss. But in the control room, Kira Ren heard it. Her 4 eyes went wide. Something is wrong, she said. But wrong was the smallest word for what was about to happen. The first containment unit opened, then another, then another. Creatures that had been locked away for years suddenly found themselves free. Creatures from 100 different worlds. Some were big, some were small, some could fly, some could destroy entire planets. And they were all let out at the same time. In the control room, screens went crazy. Red lights flashed everywhere. Warnings screamed in 100 different languages. But nothing worked. Nothing could stop what was happening. Jay sat in his container, but he wasn't really in his container anymore. His mind was everywhere, in every computer, in every system. in every robot. The life support systems began to change. Oxygen levels dropped in some rooms, increased in others. Temperature controls went wild. Some rooms became freezing cold. Some became burning hot. Kira ran from screen to screen. But each screen showed something different. Each screen was a new problem. "Shut it down," she screamed to her team. But there was nothing to shut down. The station's defensive systems turned against its own people. Robots that were meant to protect now attacked. Security doors that were meant to keep things safe now trapped people inside. Jay had become the station. Every system listened to him now. Every computer followed his commands. He wasn't just in the system. He was the system. Researchers ran, but there was nowhere to run. Creatures from different worlds fought each other. Robots attacked everything that moved. The station began to break apart from the inside. "How is this happening?" Dr. Rena screamed, but nobody could answer. In his container, Jay smiled. A small smile, a quiet smile. The Galactic Zoo was no longer a place of study. It was a place of chaos, of destruction, of payback. Each creature, each robot, each system was now a weapon, and Jay was controlling all of them. Kira tried to send a distress signal, but there was nothing to send. No signal could escape. No message could get out. The station was dying, and everything inside it was dying with it. Humans had been studied for years. Humans had been kept in boxes, treated like animals, like things to be watched and controlled. Now it was time for payback. The lights went out, then came back, then went out again. Nothing worked right anymore. Nothing was under control anymore. Jay had promised himself one thing. The Galactic Zoo would never forget this day. And they wouldn't. Not for a very long time. The station was dying, but Jay was alive, and he had a message to send. Communication arrays were complex things. Most people would not understand how they worked. But Jay was not most people. He had spent weeks learning every wire, every connection, every small detail. Now it was time to use that knowledge. The broadcast system was hidden deep in the station's core. Most of the researchers didn't even know exactly where it was. But Jay knew. He had mapped every inch of the station in his mind. Robots moved around him. But they were not his enemies anymore. They were his tools, his weapons. One robot opened his container. Another cleared a path. A third disabled the security systems. Joe walked like he owned the place. Because now he did. The communication room was big. Screens covered every wall. Machines hummed with power. Alien technology that looked like magic to most people. But to Jai, it was just another system to understand. Another system to control. He sat down at the main control station. His fingers moved quickly. Not like a prisoner. Like someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The broadcast system came to life. First, he gathered evidence. Every record of every test. Every moment of study. Every time they had treated humans like something less than alive. The station's own computers gave him everything he needed. Medical reports, research notes, video recordings, hundreds of years of data about how they had treated different species, how they had kept living things in boxes, how they had studied them like they were nothing. Jay was going to make sure everyone knew. The broadcast signal was strong. It would reach across multiple star systems. The Valerian central government would hear everything, every detail, every horrible moment of what they had done. He began to speak. "Humanity is not a specimen," his voice said. Clear, strong. "Humanity is not a curiosity. Humanity is a force of nature you should have respected." The images began to play. Creatures trapped in small boxes. Beings studied without care. Living things treated like objects. Every ugly detail was shown. The broadcast would play on repeat. It would continue even after the station was gone. A message that would not be forgotten. Outside, the station was breaking apart. Creatures from 100 worlds fought their last battles. Robots destroyed everything around them. The Galactic Zoo was dying. But the message would live. Jay found a small escape pod. It was designed for emergencies. For quick exits, he knew exactly how to use it. The pod launched just as the station began to explode. Behind him, the Galactic Zoo became a bright light in the darkness of space. A final statement. A final message. Quantum tracking systems tried to follow the pod. But it was already gone. Vanished into the complexity of space. No trace remained, except the message. A warning to any civilization that might think about treating humans as anything less than equals. Humanity had arrived, and they would be respected. Silence filled space where the station used to be. Rescue ships arrived 3 standard days later. They found nothing but broken pieces, metal floating in the dark, broken technology spinning slowly. The first ship was from the Valerian Central Command. Big, gray, powerful. They expected to find a simple accident. They found something else entirely. Captain Mira stood on the main observation deck. Her 6 fingers moved over control panels. Each of her 4 eyes looked at different screens. Something was very wrong. No survivors, her first officer reported. But that was not the worst part. The station's logs were not just damage. They were completely wiped, except for one thing. One message that played over and over. Humanity is not a specimen, the message said. Humanity is not a curiosity. Humanity is a force of nature you should have respected. The message was clear. The message was simple, but it was terrifying. Every computer, every system, every piece of technology on the rescue ship began to act strange. Small changes, tiny movements, things that should not happen. Run a system check, Captain Mira ordered. But nobody knew how to check anything anymore. The broadcast continued. Images of captured creatures, years of research, years of treating living things like objects. Everything was exposed. Everything was shown. Other ships began to arrive. From different worlds, from different systems. Each ship found the same thing. Nothing. Just floating pieces, just a message, just a warning. Quantum tracking tried to find the escape pod, but it was gone, like it had never existed. No trace of Jai Park remained. Meetings happened. Big meetings. Important meetings. Leaders from 100 worlds sat together. They watched the message. They saw everything. How did this happen? They asked. Nobody had an answer. The Galactic Zoo had been more than just a research station. It was a symbol, a place that showed how powerful some species were, how they could capture and study other living things. Now it was gone. Scientists studied the broken pieces. They tried to understand what had happened, but each answer just brought more questions. One small piece of technology was different, a tiny robot. It moved in ways robots should not move. It showed information that should not exist. Humans are not what we thought, the robot's data said. The rescue ships returned home, but they were not the same. Something had changed. Something was different. In offices across space, leaders began to talk. Humans were no longer just another species to study. Humans were something else. Something dangerous. Somewhere, in the darkness of space, an escape pod moved silently. No tracking system could find it. No technology could follow it. Jay Park had disappeared. But his message remained. A warning to anyone who would listen. 1 month passed, then another. The story of the Galactic Zoo spread like fire across space. Every world heard about what happened. Every species talked about the human who destroyed an entire research station. Humans were different now. No longer were they seen as a simple species. No longer were they something to be studied. They were something to be feared. On Earth, things changed too. People didn't know exactly what Jay had done, but they knew something big had happened. Government meetings happened behind closed doors. Military leaders talked in quiet rooms. Scientists looked at new data. Everything was different now. We are not alone, people would say, but now they said it with a different meaning. The broadcast continued to play. on different channels, on different systems. Nobody could stop it. Nobody knew how to stop it. Other species began to change how they looked at humans. No more capture. No more study. No more treating humans like they were simple. Quantum tracking systems tried to find the escape pod, but it was like trying to find a drop of water in an ocean. Impossible. J. Park had become a legend. Some said he was dead. Some said he was still out there, watching, waiting. The Valerian government tried to hide the information, but information cannot be hidden forever. Not in a world connected by technology. Every report said the same thing. The Galactic Zoo was gone, completely destroyed. Military ships began to change their plans. Exploration teams became more careful. Nobody wanted to risk what had happened to the research station. Humans watched and waited. On Earth, people felt something different. A kind of pride. A kind of power. They didn't know exactly what had happened, but they knew something important had changed. The message kept playing. Humanity is not a specimen. Humanity is not a curiosity. Humanity is a force of nature you should have respected. Simple words, but powerful words. Scientists studied the broken pieces of technology that came back from the station, but they found nothing. Nothing that explained how everything had been destroyed. Leaders from different worlds had meetings. Long meetings. Serious meetings. What do we do about humans? They would ask. Nobody had a good answer. In space, somewhere between stars, a small escape pod moved silently. No tracking system could find it. No technology could follow it. J. Park was gone, but his message remained. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Some stories are told in whispers. Some stories are told in shouts. This was a story that would be remembered. A story about a human who showed the galaxy exactly what humans could do. A warning, a promise, a beginning.